ladies and gentlemen, we are talking today about a very weird and interesting idea that I saw pop up on my Twitter feed that I didn't really see too many people on other social media platforms talking about, but it did garner a pretty big discussion on X, or Twitter. Let's just say Twitter, where I did see this originate from. Essentially, we're talking today about the Montreal Canadiens and Arpon Basu. Now, it's no secret that I think most people who follow the Canadiens who are on this YouTube channel probably know who Arpon Basu is. He's an athletic reporter for the Montreal Canadiens. He does stuff like articles, he does interviews, he gets quotes from people who are important within the organization. And we had ourselves a recent podcast episode where he goes out there and talks about the Habs. The most recent podcast episode on The Athletic is the Canadiens California Trip Chat. As the Canadiens embark on a swing through California, Arpon Basu takes questions from his hotel in Anaheim. This was published on November 22nd, and ever since the publication of this podcast, you had yourselves a few Canadiens games that, hey, surprise, surprise, took place in California. They played the Ducks, they beat the Ducks, they beat the San Jose Sharks 3-2 in a pretty good comeback victory, and then the other night on Saturday they got destroyed by the LA Kings 4-0. Pretty unfortunate loss, but that is not the be-all and end-all. When it comes to the Montreal Canadiens and their season so far, if you take a look at the numbers, you see who's been producing, who hasn't been, and just who's been making an impact in general. Right now, Cole Caufield and Nick Suzuki lead the Habs with 17 points in 21 games played. They each have 6 goals and 11 assists. Now, while sure, you could say the point production is pretty okay for guys who are in this territory of dollar amount, let's do 17 divided by 21, multiplied out by 82, and you have yourselves a point pace of around 60-ish points. While $7 million-ish is not the worst deal in the world for guys who get this amount of points, you gotta remember Caufield and Suzuki are both still pretty young. They are going to get better, and I think that's a very well agreed upon idea. After Suzuki and Caufield, though, you've got Mike Matheson, who's got 15 points on the year, Monahan's got 13, Newhook with 12, Gallagher, Pearson, Gooley, Barron, a few other guys in there as well. But when it comes to the quote-unquote MVP of the Canadiens, you could very well say that guys like Samuel Montembeault, for example, have been playing so well. They've been so impressive, and there's a reason they're the front-runner in all the Canadiens goaltender trade talks with the Edmonton Oilers. You could say that defensively, hey, Mike Matheson is going out there and scoring a bunch of points, but there are some concerns about the way he has played outside of that really deter him from that conversation. You could even say Caden Gooley has been one of the most underrated Canadiens this season. His shutdown game is elite, his facilitation of play is also great. So even though Caufield and Suzuki are leading the team in points, there are a few other guys that you could toss out if you wanted to have a conversation of quote-unquote most valuable Hab on the team. This is where Arpon Basu in his podcast goes out there and calls these two players out. The two most productive and the two most expensive Montreal Canadiens got the spotlight in Basu's latest podcast episode. Take a look at this tweet by Paul-Olivier Airoldi. This is where I initially saw the Basu comments. It's already starting. Arpon Basu in his podcast was saying that Suzuki or Caufield not being the team's MVP after 20 games is concerning. They aren't true stars, and if we expect them to become true stars, that's dooming them to failure. The Habs absolutely need a superstar. Now, this tweet got viewed 10,000 times, and I got a whole bunch of people in my timeline just kind of viewing it. Some liked it, some people replied to it, etc., etc. So what I wanted to do was go over some of the discourse surrounding this idea of Caufield and Suzuki getting called out as not being MVP caliber superstars, and the magnitude as to which we should be concerned. So when it comes to Suzuki and Caufield, I feel like it'd be very fair to say that their production this season is not really what we expected. For Nick Suzuki, sure, getting 60-plus points on the year would be fine, but the thing is he did that last year. Last year he had 66 points in 82 games played. Meanwhile, for Cole Caufield, he was scoring at a 40, near 50-goal pace for 2022-2023. This season, he's on pace for around 20 goals, period. So, both of these guys, Caufield and Suzuki, are, for lack of a better word, we'll just say they're slumping a little bit. Not because they've been playing poorly, but because they haven't been living up to expectations. I feel like last year, if you finished it off 22-23, you saw Suzuki get 66 points in 82 games played, you could realistically say, hey, if Suzuki gets 70 to 75 points next year, then we're happy. If he gets 80 points, then we're even more happy. If he gets 85 or 90 points, then we are surprised and beyond excited. Because Nick Suzuki has a ceiling of a playmaker sniper who has really good puck handling skills, really good finesse, and such a smart way of approaching the offensive zone. This is a guy that if he pans out to what we believe his ceiling could be, he could be a very legit number one center who gets maybe 85 to 90 points as one season high and maxes out as a 75 to 80 point player the rest of his career. But being on pace for the same amount of points that he had last year definitely wasn't what a lot of Canadiens fans thought would have happened. Same thing could be said about Caufield. He has actually declined in terms of goal production, and goals were what made Caufield so valuable the entire draft season and heading up into his rookie year as a Montreal Canadiens prospect. So it's interesting to note that there has been a decline here, but when it comes to the MVP conversation, as we had said, there are some other guys you could toss in there. Montembeault, you could say Caden Gooley, you could say, of course, Suzuki and Caufield. The fact that it is not unanimous right now is a little bit of a curveball as to what we thought would happen. We thought, assuming everybody would have been healthy, that Caufield would have been scoring goals like crazy, that Suzuki would have been setting him up like crazy, and that these two guys would be what the Larkin and DeBrincat pairing has been in Detroit, or what the Hughes and Miller pairing has been in Vancouver, or just name any of these other scoring duos in the NHL and say, yeah, like we thought Caufield and Suzuki at this point in the year would be able to be like that. But they're under a point per game right now, and they're nowhere near these other top-tier players, these other superstars, quote-unquote. And so the idea that Arpon Basu is proclaiming, expressing that if we're going to expect Caufield and Suzuki to be those superstar players, it would ultimately be setting them up for disappointment, I feel like that's a little bit careless of a thing to say. Mostly because I feel if you're trying to contextualize it within the scope of the Montreal Canadiens, this team as a whole has not really put Caufield or Suzuki in a great position to take that next step to becoming a superstar. And there are a few replies in this initial tweet that are essentially saying that the Montreal Canadiens lack extra depth and support, therefore Caufield and Suzuki don't really have anybody else to bounce off on. And that's a very fair perspective. You could say that if you plopped these players alongside of McDavid and Draisaitl, or if you put them on a power play with Nikita Kucherov and Stamkos, if you played them with Miller and Hughes, they'd probably start to produce more points. But at the same time, being able to drive your own line and drive your own results, that is part of what a superstar player is capable of doing. And while Suzuki and Caufield have done that to an extent this season, it has not been to that same superstar quote-unquote level magnitude. Now, does this mean they're eternally doomed forever, and that we should not expect them to become superstars? I don't know. That's your prerogative. You could go out there and expect the moon and the stars from either of these players. You could expect them to become the best Canadiens over the next 10-15 years if you want. You could expect Kent Hughes to go out there and make a big trade, to get an even better player, and to fill that void of having a superstar caliber talent on Montreal. But at the end of the day, the fact that Basu called these two guys out in his podcast was interesting to me, and it's why I wanted to make this video here today. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield are quote-unquote superstars in the NHL? And do you think, if they're not, they're going to be soon? Do you think that's a possibility? If you had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the odds that Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield are NHL superstars by the time, let's say, 2028 rolls around? Is it a 5 out of 10 chance they're there? More like a coin flip? Is it more like, okay, they have a 3.5 point whatever out of 10 chance of becoming superstar players? Or are you very pessimistic? You say, nah, they're a 1 out of 10, 0 out of 10 chance they become superstar caliber players that are just not good enough. Do you think Basu's opinion is valid here? Who has been the Montreal Canadiens MVP this season if it's not Caufield or Suzuki? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I also leave a link in the description to the Athletics podcast feed if you want to go ahead and listen to the Basu clip yourself. Of course, it's from a few days ago, so you could debate whether or not it's worth the listen because Sometimes hockey commentary getting pushed back a few days doesn't really make for the most engaging content when you're talking about something that's already happened or that's already invalidated because of whatever happens in the news later on. But either way, the link is there if you want to listen. As well, let me know your thoughts in the comment section, though, about this entire Caufield Suzuki MVP conversation. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.